2006 Lexus IS350. I'll be removing the Bank 1 catalytic converter. Bank 1 is the passenger side. You want to unplug the O2 sensor first. Just reach up under this carpet basically and just rip it. I'm not a professional mechanic. It's my car. I don't really care. Some people will pick up all this plastic first. I don't care. This is good enough. There's a little rubber grommet. You just want to push that through. You can see into the bottom of the car. This part, there's a little plastic push. You push that cord the rest of the way through the hole. The Bank 2 or driver's side is a real pain in the butt, so I'm going to start with removing the carpet. Oh, grommet down here. I can feel it. Push that rubber grommet out the same way. Take this O2 sensor off. And then push the cord the rest of the way out. Put your parking brake on. Page 263 of the manual shows you where to jack the car. I've got the car high enough now I can comfortably go under with the creeper. Seems solid. A lot of car parts shops will let you rent their O2 sensor sets. There's a small one, a medium, and a large. To take off these bottom O2 sensors, the downstream ones, you need the medium-sized one with a 1/2-inch drive. I'm going to use the breaker bar because they can be on there pretty tight. You might even need to spray some PB Blaster on there, something like that. Take the hole, put it over there. Same thing on the other side. Yours probably won't come as loose as this. I've already had to do this job some, so I've taken these on and off a few times recently. Normally there's a bunch of plastic on the hood and underneath on this car. Because I've done this job a few times already, I've already taken it all off. I'm not going to show you how to do that. It's pretty straightforward. But this job has to at least have all this taken off and at least everything on the left side of the engine. We need to remove this Y pipe. You're going to use a size 14 wrench on the bolt, a size 14 ratchet head on the nut, 2 on this side, and then over here where we're actually replacing the cat, you can see newer ones, 2 on that side, and then follow this white pipe all the way down, and we've got these 2 springy bolts, I forget what they're called. Once you have the nuts off the bolts, keep those bolts in to keep this Y pipe in place because we don't want it to fall down on us once everything's loose. These spring bolts in the rear, you actually just need your ratchet. There's a built-in nut welded in the back. Similar to the front bolts, I'm going to keep these spring bolts in just enough that I can actually hand loosen them when I need to. Before you can actually take your Y pipe off, there are these 2 bars in the way. This long, smooth black bar you have to take off. It's got a little spot here, this little tab, that's showing a sort of a V, but it's pointing towards the front of the car. That's what you want when you put it back, is for that part to be visible and facing the front of the car. This other one, I've got a piece of painter's tape here, so I know which side should be facing and towards the front, but I'm not sure if it actually matters as long as you bolt it flush to the frame. These will require a size 12 ratchet head. With those 2 bars removed and the bolts still holding the Y pipe in place, I've now got the jack with a piece of cardboard on it underneath the secondary catalytic converters. So I'm going to jack it up and then I'm going to take the bolts out, starting with the front ones. They kind of hold themselves in place. Gravity pulls them down, but they're angled at such a way the friction catches. And then on the rear side, I'll take those out slowly and kind of balance it while I loosen up the jack. My jack is holding the Y pipe up. Now I'm going to actually take these bolts out. Now I'm going to do it on the other side too, with all 4 of the front bolts out. And I'm going to take these out. And there, it kind of caught it. And just by hand, kind of try to keep it from falling too hard. Now we're just going to kind of drag it out. So I want to explain what I think is going on under the car. For those of you like me who might be confused when you're told you need to replace your catalytic converter and you look under and there's like a bunch of stuff. So this is the exhaust manifold. It's hooked up to the engine. The exhaust comes through here. This is your upstream O2 sensor. And then this is the catalytic converter, your primary catalytic converter. And this is the piece that I'm actually replacing. This is the old one. And I'm taking the new one out and doing something to it. That piece connects right here into your Y pipe. It's got a bunch of heat shields attached. And this, my understanding is your secondary catalytic converter. But your oxygen sensor is tied up here. So the only one that actually is sending any sort of error is between those two. So that's the primary one. This is your secondary. And then this, I believe, is the resonator, which is something that actually bounces sound around and makes it sound differently to make it more pleasant to people. Most of the bolts on the catalytic converter can be removed from underneath pretty easily, but there's one in particular that is very difficult, and to get to it more easily, you actually have to remove the dipstick, which is even more of a pain than removing the bolt itself. So this is the hardest part of it that I've done so far. I'm going to show you how I do it. It's not necessarily the right way, but I've tried removing the battery. I've tried removing this box here. It didn't actually help. So I'm going to show you how I've been doing it. It's a pain. If you have big hands, you might decide you don't even want to do this job, or at least not do this part the way I'm telling you to do it. Step one, there's some sort of sensor here. It looks like an air intake sensor. We want to take that off. There are clips here, 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, and this 4th one is kind of strange. You do it and then you've got to pull underneath, and that starts to pull up. We also want to take a Phillips head screwdriver and just loosen this portion. Pull up on this, pull that off. This piece right here, it's okay to just take off. Should have taken that off while it was still tight. And then just set that aside. Next, we're just going to take the dipstick out. And this box we unhooked, by the way, this is your exterior filter, your air filter, that air that goes to your engine. So you can beat that out, or if you ever want to replace it, that's how you would get to it. So there are 2 things here we can remove or unclamp that will help us get access to removing the dipstick. One is this piece right here. Do it with 2 hands, get some pliers or something, clamp down on it and pull, and it's easy enough. Now, I don't know what this actually does, but fluid didn't come out, so I'm fine with removing it. The other one is right here. There are some clamps down there to clamp and pull it off as well. That one is actually your gas line. I found that after I pulled it off. You've got a battery right here. You can make a spark. It could be dangerous. You can do this job without removing either of these. I did it the first time I did it. So if you don't want to take that risk, that's fine. But I hate this part enough that I'm willing to take it off. The gas just hold it up and it seems to go back down into the gas tank. Nothing actually floods out. So there's this piece of metal and a bolt attached to it. That is a size 12 bolt. That is attached to your dipstick. It is like welded together so it won't come off on its own. What I do is I reach a hand down through here with a ratchet. Reach my other hand through here. Pass my ratchet to the other hand so I can get a stable hold of it. And then I use that right hand to kind of hold the head in place and the left hand to actually move the ratchet. Passing the ratchet to myself. It's loosened enough. I'll get my left hand out first. You can see where my right hand is with the ratchet. So now it's loose enough you can actually just kind of loosen it with your thumb. And this is the bolt and washer you will be pulling out. So here's the Bank 1 Y pipe, or the Bank 1 catalytic converter. And with all the plastic stuff off, I'm going to show you a couple very nice places you can view things. One is over here by the oil pan. There are one of the bolts that we're going to have to take off, or one of the nuts we're going to have to take off. And that right there is the wiring harness for your O2 sensor over there. So first thing we want to do is go ahead and reach your hand in there and feel around and unhook that wire sensor. Then we're going to take that first bolt off. Up further from the oil pan, closer to the front of the car, we now have this other gap with the plastic nut being on there. And from here, we can see two of the bolts there, a third one there. And if you reach your hand up, you can actually feel the other two on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the most difficult one first, which is the top one furthest from here. That's the one that we had to remove the dipstick for. The dipstick would have been blocking it if we didn't take that out. We're going to take that hardest one off first, then these bottom two. If we take the top two off, it's going to kind of leverage the manifold against these bottom two. I don't want to do that, cause some damage. So I'm going to take the hardest one, the bottom two, and then the top two. Those catalytic converter bolts come off with a size 12 long head. These bolts on the actual manifold come off very easily once they're cracked. So you can basically get them to pop and then just do them by hand. Now I don't know the proper thing to do here, but me personally, that O2 sensor, which is in the dark right there, I keep it in when I take it out. Is when we take the bolts off, we take the nuts off, this is just pretty much going to fall off, and then we twist it, and this gap right here is large enough you can twist this the right way and get that O2 sensor to come out angled through that area. Last bolt is off. Got my knee against the converter. Just gonna let go of it. Grab hold of it here, twist it. So the O2 sensor comes out right there. And there is your catalytic converter with O2 sensor attached. This is my third time taking this part off and on. This is the old one. The first time I did it was I took that off just to make sure I could actually do the job because I wasn't sure if I could. The second time was yesterday. I was actually replacing the old one with the new one. Now what happened is I got this one secondhand kind of. I got it off eBay. It was I think $140 after shipping. Really cheap compared to brand new. It cost about $350, $400, something like that. However, I got this new one and there were holes in it. Various holes. Tiny, but there were still holes. So I decided I would plug it with JB Weld. The problem is the temperature on these cats gets so hot, gets up to 1600 degrees according to my Googling. However, the JB Weld I put on, it was only worth about 400 degrees. So once I got the car up and going, it started smoking, smelled like bad fish, and so I actually ended up realizing it was the JB Weld, wasn't a problem with the installation. So now that I've heated it up, it should be damaged enough I can actually scratch it off. So now I'm going to clean up this catalytic converter, scrape off all the JB Weld, and then find a much more temperature resistant adhesive to put on there and fill in and patch these holes. Now let's talk about the heat shield a minute. On the old cat, there were these tabs here that kept the heat shield on. This new one I got, after I take it off, you'll see, or you can just notice now, it doesn't actually have those. So this is running loose. So be aware of that if you're trying to buy a catalytic converter secondhand, that it might not have those tabs to keep your heat shield in place. So with this reinstallation going on, I'm going to try to put something back there, but I'm going to show you how I get it off. It's really easy. There are these 4 tabs that just fold over, flathead screwdriver, pry it up, and then you can use some pliers or something, get it the rest of the way. Just try not to break it. You just do that for all 4 tabs. So the heat shield is off now, and you can see where the heat shield was. This part of the JB Weld is like ash almost. It's just burned up. And I'll note this was JB Weld Quick Weld, which is different than the normal JB Weld, but nonetheless, I think even the normal JB Weld, even the high heat JB Weld, does not handle the temperatures that are needed for this cat. So I'm going to need to find a specialty product for it. It took a few hours, but the majority of the JB Weld is gone. So now I'm going to try to find the holes again, because there were at least 3. What I've done is I've put some packing tape over, all the other holes. There's actually a hole right there. So originally, I used this JB Quick Will. This will withstand temperatures up to 230 degrees Fahrenheit, which, if you'll notice, is less than 1600. I found this Permatex muffler tailpipe putty, withstands 2000 up to 2000. And then I found this Tiger Patch muffler tailpipe quick patch tape. Got 2 of those, up to 1900. The Permatex muffler and tailpipe putty comes with 2 packs, and I was able to slather all the welds with it with just the 1 pack. Gave it about 10-15 minutes. I wrapped the tape on. The tape started easier, got stickier as time went on. It's a pretty messy job. Now I'm going to reinstall the O2 sensor. You just put some lubricant on there. That copper stuff comes with the O2 sensor, and screw it in as is. You got to get a new gasket, ideally. It fits right on there. Okay, we're about to put the catalytic converter back in. Have your 6 nuts ready. You can see the gasket I already had up there, which is new. So I'm going to keep that one, not install the other. Just going to push it back. And the threads kind of hold it in place. I'm going to put this in the same way it came out. Tilted with the O2 sensor going up that way. Got gloves on because I got this Tiger stuff. Reach in from the holes. Got my leg propping it up again. There we go. Grab the nuts. Hand loosen them on until I can let go again. Not sure if you can see any of this, but we got to reach in there, grab the O2 sensor, and plug it back in. Now that the O2 sensor is plugged back in, I'm going to go ahead and start tightening these nuts. What I'm doing, I'm kind of like you do with a tire, trying to go opposites and split the difference in half. So I'm going to do the top rearmost nut first, then this bottom forward one, top middle, top closest forward, and bottom furthest back. And I just rotate doing them a little bit at a time until they're all snug. With the cat installed snugly, we need to reinstall the tube here. The best way to do it is just take this metal piece here, push it flush to that block down there, and then you can kind of move around and grab with your hands and you can tell where it is. Trying to match the metal up with that block and reaching my hand down, I can feel with my fingers kind of under the engine block the tube where it needs to be. So it's in place. Now you just need to, there, sounds like that when it's in. Now you just need to put your hands back down in there and get that bolt back in. After the dipstick pipe is reconnected, and you curse the bastards at Toyota for putting it there, take this air hose, re-add it there, move the clamp. Don't forget about this fuel line if you took it out. Put it back on and reclamp it. Now we can put the dipstick back in. Take this air hose pipe, whatever it is, reconnect that sensor, screwdriver, tighten it up. And then we get all these clamps back on properly. You might have to make sure this one's not in the way. Unbuckle it further, then rebuckle it. Then we put this tube back into the air intake pipe. Then everything under the engine is done, aside from making sure your tools aren't there. Just if you want to, behind the resonator, there is another type of gasket back here. Pretty easy, just take a screwdriver and pry the other one off if it won't go, and put the new one on. Now you take your white pipe with your piece of cardboard or wood or whatever you have, and find the balance point, then slide it under carefully. Earlier I mentioned how this part of the white pipe tended to hold itself in due to gravity. Because of that, you want to install this portion first, so you can kind of push it back and then pull it forward once it's raised up. So once you get near level, start tying in the back first. Now that I've got this rear mouthpiece kind of where it needs to be, this flange here lined up, and the front is nearly jacked up to where it needs to be, I'm going to go ahead and move to the front and put the bolts in. I'm going to go ahead and let you know there is supposed to be another gasket at this joint right here between the catalytic converter and the white pipe. One hand holding this one in place, knee holding this part of the white pipe in place, Now I'm going to put the bolts in. I like to, not even sure if you can fit the bolt going upwards in here, but it seems to be easier regardless to put the bolt downwards. I'm just going to hand tighten as far as they'll go for now. Now I'm taking these spring bolts and hand tightening them as well. With the Y pipe held in place, we can loosen the jack, take it out, and have room to creep around again. 14mm ratchet and wrench to tighten both nuts and bolts on both these sides. Now the 14mm ratchet to retighten the spring bolts. 12mm ratchet to reinstall this black bar, making sure that arrow is facing you and pointed towards the front of the vehicle. 12mm ratchet again to get this other black bar in and make sure it's flush with the frame. Alright, hand screw the O2 sensor back in. Once you've hand tightened the O2 sensor, you put that medium size O2 sensor socket back on and your breaker bar, what have you, and snug it up just a little bit more. Alright, go back in the car and move the rug some, but now you put the electronic end of the connection portion of the O2 sensor back up in there, and then you get the little rubber gasket piece. You pull it just enough. There's a little line around the rim. You want it to be there so it's locked tight. Now we just do the same thing on the other side. Hand screw it in, then use the O2 socket, then push the connection end up through and make sure that grommet is in correctly. Alright, now just replug in the wires on the driver's side. Triangle piece goes where the clip is. Stuff the carpet back. Alright, you replug the sensor in on the passenger side and push this carpet back.